Well, welcome back, everyone. It's been a little while since we've been together, a little bit of a break, and hope that during that time that all has been well with you, and also perhaps that you got caught up with where we are on our journey on the road to somewhere. I did want to say I'm going to give you my email address. For those of you that are getting your info off of Facebook, I'm never sure how many people actually get what I send out on Facebook. So if you'd like to get onto the actual email for Telos Project and where I send out the weekly updates also, this is my email address. Just send me an email and tell me that you'd like to get on there, and I'll make sure that you begin to get the emails through Telos Project. Our little journey on the road to somewhere has a very simple goal, and that is to help you understand the whole Bible. And today we begin a new season in that journey, and we're going to be in season 4. And again, just to remind you, we're both going through my book, The Road to Somewhere, which again, the purpose that I wrote that book for was to actually get people to go to watch the videos that I did, 66 45-minute videos that take you through every book of the Bible, and trying to figure out a way to perhaps get more people aware of those videos. I thought about writing a book, and I did. It's a novel. It has a story to it. It also, every chapter gives a brief little overview of what the book is that is attached to it. And then what it does is it tries to encourage you to go to the longer lecture on whatever particular book is attached to whatever town we might be in on Route 66. So today we really start season 4 in the book. It's actually leg 4 of the journey down Route 66, and we are going to be in a new state. So we're going to be in the state of Oklahoma, and we're going to be going through the prophets of the Old Testament. And this first episode I'm simply calling Goats, and I'll explain what that means a little bit later and how it fits in to what we're doing. So again, we have been through, in our first 3 seasons, we've been through 3 states that travel through Route 66. We've been through Illinois and Missouri, and just that little portion of Route 66 that runs through Kansas. And as we have traveled down Route 66 through those 3 states, we've also gone through 3 major sections of the Bible. We've gone through the Law or Torah or the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We've gone through the rest of Old Testament history, which were 12 books. And we have gone through what's referred to, at least within Christian circles, as the Old Testament poetic books. Those 5 books, as we went through the little state, or the little 13 miles where Route 66 cuts through the state of Kansas. So far, as we've been through those 3 states, we've actually been through 22 books of the Old Testament. And this season, again, what we're going to be doing is going through the state of Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is a great state in terms of Route 66. It actually has more of the original road than any other state that Route 66 runs through. Many states it's been covered over by interstate, but Oklahoma has a lot of great stretches, and it also has just a lot of really kind of fun Route 66 attractions, so it should be a good time going through Oklahoma. When we go through Oklahoma, we're in the long term, we're going to be making 17 stops in Oklahoma. I'll show you kind of what a map of Oklahoma. This is a map of Route 66 through the state of Oklahoma, and a lot of these little towns along the way are towns we're going to be stopping in because there are 17 books of prophecy in our Old Testament. And those 17 books are divided up. We're going to take it in chunks so that you don't get overwhelmed and get behind. The first 5 of the books in our Bible are usually referred to as the major prophets. In the Hebrew Bible, they're referred to as the latter prophets, and that's because what we refer to as history, they refer to as the former prophets. And again, in the Hebrew Bible, there's actually only 3 of the latter prophets. Daniel and Lamentations are not included in that section of their Bible called the Tanakh. They both are part of what are called the writings. But in our Bible, again, we have these 5 books that we refer to as the major prophets, and then we have 12 books we call the minor prophets. In the Hebrew Bible, those 12 books actually are all contained on one scroll, and that's one of the reasons why, even though the content of the Hebrew Bible in Old Testament is the same as the Christian Old Testament, but the numbers are different. In other words, there's only 22 books in the Hebrew Old Testament or Tanakh, because they've combined several of the books they've combined together, but the 12 minor prophets are simply called the 12, and they are contained again on a single scroll, viewed like what we would think of as one book. So again, that's kind of why we have 39 books in our Old Testament, and in the Jewish Bible there are only 24 books, but again, same content. So let's cross over into our 4th state and get into the state of Oklahoma and into the prophets. One of the things we're going to see a little bit later is that Oklahoma really is the home of Route 66. The origins of this highway and its name really all came out of Oklahoma, but we'll pick up on that a little bit later as we move through the prophets. Our first stop in Oklahoma is going to be way up here in the corner of the state, actually just 10 miles down the road from our last stop in Kansas, and we're coming to a little town called Commerce, population 2,200. Our 2 protagonists in the story, in the book itself, they drive this 10 miles from the state line of Kansas down to Oklahoma and the city of Commerce. City of Commerce has, it has a couple of old Route 66 attractions right along the main street of the town, which is actually Route 66. But the big attraction in Commerce takes place just off of Route 66 on the corner of Quincy and C Street, and that is that this was the home of one of the greatest baseball players of all time. This term GOAT, if you aren't familiar with it, simply refers to the 4 words greatest of all time. And so you'll hear people referred to. So for instance, many people believe that Tom Brady is the GOAT of football, the greatest of all time, at least for now. I think he might get chased by Patrick Mahomes, but we'll see as the seasons unfold. If you happen to watch the Olympics, Simone Biles was referred to as the GOAT of female gymnastics, the greatest of all time. And the baseball player that lived here, some believe really is the greatest of all time. And here we have a kind of a scene of a main street in Commerce, again, Oklahoma. And when you get over there to that corner of Quincy and C Street, there's just this little white frame house, and off to the side an old tin kind of a garage or storage unit. And this was the home of, again, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, Mickey Mantle. Most lists of the greatest don't put him in the number one spot, but he seems to always be at least in the top 10 of all of these lists that people come up with. And Commerce was his childhood home. As a matter of fact, one of his early nicknames was the Commerce Comet. And he was a great baseball player, wore number 7 for the New York Yankees. And the highlight of his career was sort of the late 50s and the early 60s. And so John and Joy head over to Mickey's childhood home. That old tin barn that you saw there, and I think I got a picture of it, it's a little dilapidated now. I'm actually kind of surprised that people haven't restored either the house or the barn, given how famous Mickey Mantle was. But in bad weather, this is where Mickey's dad and uncle pitched batting practice to him when he was a kid. And so Joy has decided that she wants to shoot their video in front of this old barn. And so the Corvette isn't in this particular video, but John is going to talk about the importance of this barn as he gives his little spiel on the video that they shoot. As a matter of fact, in the video, they're shooting videos that go with the lectures or the teaching, the longer teaching on Route 66. And again, he's trying to encourage people to get to that. But he begins by telling a little bit of the story of Mickey Mantle and the barn here that was used. And by the way, Mickey Mantle, one of the things he was known for is one of the greatest switch hitters of all time. In other words, he could bat just as effectively as a left-hander as he could as a right-hander. And a lot of that goes back to his childhood because his dad was right-handed, his uncle was left-handed, and the two of them pitched batting practice to him, and they switched up so that he would have to learn how to hit off of a left-handed pitcher from perhaps the left-hand side of the plate and also from right-hand pitchers. So John tells a little bit of that story, gives a little bit of the background. He also talks about the fact that when he was growing up, he remembers how that his dad seemed to compare every Major League Baseball player to Mickey Mantle. And so Mickey Mantle was a part of John's life growing up. By the way, switching out of the story and just into my own personal experience, when I was a young boy, one of the places we lived for a number of years was St. Louis. I was actually born in St. Louis, and we've talked about that in another episode. But I can remember, watching a little bit of baseball on my grandparents' black and white TV. And in St. Louis, of course, the great hero was Stan Musial. Stan the Man, it was his, kind of baseball nickname, and he was great. And Mickey Mantle and Stan played against each other, so I remember Mickey Mantle from my own childhood. So after John has talked a little bit about Mickey, about the house, about the barn, he then transitions to the biblical book that is attached to this particular geographical spot, and that is the major prophet, the first of the major prophets, Isaiah. And when we talk about goats, greatest of all time, many people would probably say that Isaiah is the goat of the prophets. It was a book that was extremely popular. The reason that it's the first of the major prophets, interestingly enough, has nothing to do with chronology. It isn't the earliest of the prophets, although it is quite early. And it isn't because it's the most important of the prophets. The major prophets are simply called that because they are, in terms of their content, they're much longer than the 12 minor prophets. And again, chronology is kind of mixed up simply because of the fact that they are structured or arranged according to length, not according to timeline or importance. Although I would have to say that the major prophets, which are Isaiah and Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, and then Lamentations kind of gets thrown into the five. In many old manuscripts, Lamentations was actually attached to Jeremiah because Jeremiah is the prophet who speaks and whose messages were recorded in Lamentations. So anyway, it gives you a little bit of a sense, but Isaiah is the first of the major prophets. Isaiah is a fascinating book, and it actually has 66 chapters. So if you think for a second about the fact that there are 66 books in the Christian Bible, Isaiah has 66 chapters, and interestingly enough, Isaiah is sort of divided, as almost all the prophets are. There probably are two main messages of almost all of the prophets, and those are that almost all of the prophets have some kind of a message of judgment. It might be a judgment that's coming against the northern kingdom, just a few of the prophets. And of course, we know that the Assyrian Empire destroyed the northern kingdom in 722 BC. But the second message of most of the prophets is kind of a message of hope, because many messianic prophecies are contained in the prophets. Well, our Bible has 66 books, and of course 39 of them are what we call the Old Testament, which is the story of Israel and the law and all that happened to the nation of Israel. And then 27 books of our Bible, what we call the New Testament, is a message of salvation. It's the story of Jesus, and then how do you become a follower of Jesus, and instructions on how to live that life. And in the book of Isaiah, the first 39 chapters really deal with judgment. And then a shift takes place in chapter 40, where the last 27 books, although there is still some judgment in there, are primarily a message of hope and are filled with some of the most clear prophecies of the coming of Jesus that we have in the Bible. So in a sense, you could kind of think of Isaiah as a mini Bible, 66 chapters, 39 chapters of judgment, and 27 chapters of hope and salvation. Isaiah tells us that he was writing at a specific point in time, and that's one of the things about the prophets. Again, since they aren't in chronological order, if you want to place them in some sort of chronology, you need to know what kings were these prophets prophesying under, and many of the books begin by telling you exactly when this prophet was giving the messages that God gave him. So Isaiah begins out simply by telling us that this is the vision concerning Judah and Jerusalem that Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. What that tells us is it gives us kind of a range of the dates during which Isaiah was having visions that were eventually written down. And so, again, Isaiah isn't a book that sort of has a straight line where it began never, and then has one single narrative all the way through and ends. It's actually a compilation of a number of visions. Some scholars believe there are actually 12 different visions that Isaiah has. Here in verse 1, it says that it was concerning Judah and Jerusalem, but there was a lengthy section in Isaiah where he really speaks to almost every surrounding nation, and the fact that a day is coming when these nations that, of course, had attacked at one time or another or were enemies of Judah or Israel, that they were going to experience judgment. So one of the things that Isaiah has, let me see here. Well, I was going to show you. These arrows represent different parts of the prophecy of Isaiah that talk about judgment against these different, again, either states or cities or nations or people groups that at some point in time, again, were enemies of Judah or Israel. And the thing that's amazing, this might just look kind of confusing with all these arrows, but the thing that's amazing is that we know historically every one of these nations were at some point in time destroyed and lost their preeminence exactly as was prophesied by Isaiah. Then there are all of these parts of Isaiah that have to do with messianic prophecy, some of the critical texts of the coming of Messiah. Chapter 53 of Isaiah, if you get a chance, read chapters 52 and 53. They're a long prophecy about the coming of Messiah, and it's an amazing picture of Jesus, but probably the classic text in those verses is in chapter 53, verse 6, where Isaiah says, "We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." And so it's a statement about what Christ was going to do at the cross, and by the way, written 700 years before Jesus appeared on the scene. And so again, it is filled with great messianic material. The video of the teaching on Isaiah is so loaded, and I can't encourage you enough to take the time that after you watch this little video to go on and watch that teaching, because again, it goes into much greater depth about Isaiah. It's interesting that the book actually ends, by the way, in chapters 65 and 66, where Isaiah talks about the new heavens and the new earth. And of course, our Bible ends chapters 20 and 21, 22 about giving a sort of a real picture of the new heavens and the new earth. So again, a little bit like a mini Bible. So John has given a little bit of background on it. He really encourages his audience to watch the teaching video on Isaiah. And I would encourage you to do the same. Joy is very impressed how well John summarizes this quite lengthy and complex book of the Old Testament. Of course, she still thinks that he's a psychology professor that doesn't know much about the Bible, and the revelation of who he really is about to come, and the story takes a big kind of twist in the book at that point in time. And John sort of tells her that he kind of cheated by watching the video on Isaiah, and that's why he knew so much about Isaiah. But they pack up and get ready to head just a short stretch down the road. And this is, of course, what we're going to be looking at next week. But they leave Commerce and they just come down the road to Miami, Oklahoma. And there in Miami, Oklahoma, along with giving a little bit of the background of that town on Route 66, the matching major prophet that we'll be looking at is the prophet Jeremiah. So again, just want to encourage you, watch the teaching video. It's loaded, and we'll see you next week as we head to Miami, Oklahoma, and take a look at the prophet Jeremiah. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you next week.